I thought I'd take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about our planning exercise that we've gone through over the last couple of years under David's leadership. I actually had the opportunity to chair the chamber this year, and so when I came in as chair, I knew the focus was going to be on 2040. And this, what we call 2040, has been a planning effort that really identifies how can Omaha grow its economic base. And when you really boil down 2040 planning, what they're trying to get at in the planning effort is, how do you grow when you're not growing? I mean, Omaha, if left to its own devices, will not grow. And so for us to grow our economy, we're going to have to attract and retain people. They call it net migration. So we know we've got to bring people in, and we also know the only way to bring people in is with the creation of jobs. And when you get into the creation of jobs, it's a very difficult effort, and it requires a lot of coordination with the public sector, private sector, and even in many cases the philanthropic sector when you get involved in education and what's needed to make people workforce ready. And so the 2040 plan pulls all this together, but when you step back and say, how are we going to make this happen? If you go back in time and look at the chamber and the size of it, about 50% of the budget has been covered by the Prosper campaigns. So as we sit here today, we've got an organization that has a $10 million budget, 70 people working for the chamber that wake up every day trying to figure out how to address this challenge and make Omaha win. And when I say make Omaha win, unfortunately, every person that moves into Omaha is one person that moved away from somebody. It is a zero-sum game when you step back, and the winners are going to be the ones that are able to attract and take away from other markets talented workforce. And that's why the chamber is here, to accomplish all of that. And so you taking the time to understand the chamber's mission, you taking your time to contribute to Prosper 2.0, I can't tell you how important it is for the betterment of Omaha. And so, again, thank you for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
Good afternoon, everybody. All right, we're going to do that again. I know that's a David thing, but doggone it. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. All right, that's the energy we're looking for. Thank you. My name is Tim Burke, and I'm the President and CEO of Omaha Public Power District, and I get the great pleasure to chair the Prosper 2.0 campaign. What we're doing this year, really, is the follow-up of the work we did in 2017. But what we are doing is raising $30 million to support the strategies that Dana talked about that lead us to that 2040 result that we need here in this region. But it started in 2017. We did a deep dive within the community. We hired a futurist, and many of you may have participated in some of the community events. So there was thousands of people that were involved either in interviews or focus groups or action work, really kind of laying out what we believed was the greatest strategies for this region to begin to partake on and to begin to drive. We certainly understood business growth, as Dana spoke about, is very critical to all of our businesses. We need to have that business growth. And so David's going to get into the specifics of each one of these areas, but the business growth is really important because what we've done is we've kind of put it on steroids. We've kind of said, listen, we just don't want marginal wages, we want high wages. And so the wages we're talking about are jobs that are $50,000 a year and above, right? Increased capital investment, ongoing site development work that's been incredibly successful to date in this region, very clearly. The other two pieces that came out of that visioning session was around talent, it was around people, and it was around place. And it's interesting, as I have gone and knocked on a lot of corporations' doors and met with CEOs and general partners, these are the two things that they are energized about. They are energized about thinking about talent, recruitment, development, retention within their business, within the community, within the region, and they understand that we have to have a place that allows people to want to stay here and families to grow and families to continue their education and graduates to stay here as well. I just met with a large company here in western Omaha, and the CEO said, it's tech talent. It is tech talent. That's what I need. and I need to keep people, and it's very competitive in this marketplace. So to Dana's perspective, as we begin to grow business, a lot of those businesses are tech-related businesses that are creating challenges within our own community today with talent. So how do we begin to grow that at a completely different level that we've ever grown tech talent here in this region, very clearly. But there's an opportunity to do that, and there are strategies around that David's going to talk about. But that becomes one of those strategies that people say, now I understand why you've kind of gone from a $25 million campaign to a $30 million plus campaign, is for us to really focus on those two elements of talent recruitment and development and people, and then the place. The other component around the people that has been really important for us in my business, because I serve customers all throughout the eastern Nebraska region, is this concept about diversity and inclusion. And this is really the first time that I've seen an economic development plan that's driving the conversation around diversity and inclusion. Very clearly, we heard it very distinctly from our YPs. All YPs, but specifically our African American YPs. But it's something that we as a community need to embrace if we really want to keep our talent here. And what we found is there was a significant amount, a great number, 8 times more YPs from the African American population that would be willing to leave, right? To go to some other location to continue their education or continue their professional work. And so to Dana's point, we have to keep our talent here in Omaha, and we have to find a way to do that and create really the initiatives around this place that we call Omaha or Eastern Nebraska or the metropolitan region really keeps people and attracts people and allows people to do the things they need to do in this region. And then the place piece. This is the first time that the Chamber in a strategy has really taken on kind of transportation, multimodal relative strategies. So this strategy, this Prosper 2.0, is completely different than I've seen in my 20 plus years at the Omaha Chamber, working in a variety of different committees or subcommittees on a number of different things. It really is that kind of substantial difference where we need your assistance today. And so we want you to ask questions. We want you to seek clarification. We want you to really understand how the strategies that we're laying out will benefit your business, will benefit this region, will benefit this community, and ultimately allow us to continue successful growth in this region for the benefit of all of us. And so what I get to do is follow up with you after today at some point in time and give you a call and meet with you individually. But you don't have to wait for me to meet with you, right? As I tell people, you can fill out your memorandum of intents long before I get there and submit it in. But we're going to give you a request on what we would like you to think about in the participation of Prosper 2.0, and then follow up and just have any additional conversations that you may want to have. So thank you for being here. Thanks for being part of the Prosper 2.0 campaign. I look forward to get to know all of you a little more deeper as we get an opportunity to talk about the campaign and the benefits and how it may impact your business. But I'll let David Brown, the president of the Greater Omaha Partnership, to go into a little bit more detail about each of these elements around business growth, around people, and around place.
Well, let's talk about growth first off. If we continue to grow at the rate we're growing right now from a population perspective, we will grow by 2040 to about 1.1 or 1.2 million people in this metro area. If we continue at that growth rate and the business community keeps growing at the rate that it is now, we'll be about 100,000 people short from a labor force perspective. So if we continue growing at about that 1.5% rate, and our GDP continues to grow at about 1.5%, somewhere between now and 2040, we will not only run out of people, but we'll start seeing a significant deficit of people. And what that does for you as business people is say, well, I got to start thinking about where else I can grow my business. Or do I bother growing my business if I'm going to be fighting about talent? So how do I attract more people here? Or do I do it just do it somewhere else? And frankly, I think you expect us as an organization that looks into the future to worry about those kind of things. So how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? That if indeed we want to grow our business community even faster, what do we have to do to accomplish that? We can do that through taxes and regulation and all the legislative work, But none of that works if we don't figure out the people piece. So we believe that the population needs to grow to somewhere between 1.3 and 1.4 million people between now and 2040. Let's just say it's a $200,000 non-organic growth number. In over 20 years, do the math, that's a boatload of people we got to get every single year here. They're coming here or staying here faster and more readily than they are today. And we have to do some extraordinary things to make those kind of things happen. So how do we do that? Well, we've got a strategy that we have built on the foundation of the 2040 plan that many of you participated in last year. And Rebecca Ryan came in and challenged us all to think about what target do we want to put out in front of us by 2040. And it's a pretty aggressive target. I mean, the people that came to these sessions weren't shy about saying we want to have a place that is considered to be an innovation leader in this country, an engaging place where everybody feels as though they're welcome, a place where new industries start up and existing industries can flourish, a place that's exciting and energetic that people want to live in. That's the kind of 2040 vision that we had about this community. And so we want to accomplish that. Now, we aren't the only player in that. We did this 2040 strategy with United Way and with the Urban League. And we did that because we realized that any kind of a vision about this community is not merely going to be focused on the economy. It's also going to look at other pieces of the community. And so we've actually kind of open sourced this 2040 Omaha strategy and said anybody can use it. We want everybody to engage in it and try and help them think about their own strategic plans. But for our purposes today, we took a slice of it and said, what can we as the chamber lead over the next 5 years to start taking steps towards accomplishing that 2040 Omaha that we all talked about for almost a year last year. And it came down to three things, as both Tim and Dana have talked about: people, place, and business growth. And we think if we do those three things together, then we'll see a region that has much more opportunity for prosperity than it has today. So I'm going to talk about some of the components of each of those three things: business growth, people, and place. So let's talk about business growth first. If you think about economic development, this is what you think the chamber should be doing. This is about business growth from stem to stern, from entrepreneurship all the way to mature industry and everything in between. We need to worry about startups, and we'll talk a bit more about that as I move on here. We need to be making sure that small businesses have all the assistance that they need to grow as quickly as they possibly can, and that we can help them do that here. We need to help existing medium-sized businesses decide to grow here and then help them to grow here. We need to be able to take these pillar kind of companies that we have in our community, the headquarters that we have here already, the clusters that we have that are real strong as far as industry type, and make sure we can continue to be competitive for them. And we need to be thinking not just about domestic businesses, but also about international businesses. So you want us in that space, and we've said, yep, we're going to do that. But we're going to take a bit of a twist this time, and we're going to talk not just about quantity, which is where we've really focused our attention over the past 20 years, is how can we do more? How can we do 1,000 jobs for 1 year, and then we'll do 1,500 jobs the next year, and 2,500 jobs the year after that? And so usually every year you'll see some kind of an incremental, every time we do a campaign like this, you'll see some kind of incremental growth in the number of jobs that we hope the clients that we work with will produce in this market. We've actually reduced it a little bit this time. Our goal for Prosper 1.0 was 12,000 jobs over a 5-year period. We've blown past that number already. But we think for this next one, we've got to recognize that first off, the labor market's tight. The types of jobs we're going after are going to be different. And so we've set a goal of 10,000 jobs, but those 10,000 jobs should be at or above $50,000 a year. And we're going to measure that, so by the time we're done with this, we want to have seen $500 million in additional payroll come out of the jobs that we're going to be helping to create by working with existing companies, startups, and new companies coming into the market. So first off, we've got a qualitative piece about the kinds of jobs we're going after, and the number, again, is a little bit smaller, but for good reason, we think. Secondly is capital investment. So we've got a $3 billion capital investment number identified as a goal over the next 5 years. We're already at $1.2 billion for this first year, this year, the last year of the Prosper 1.0 strategy. A lot of it depends upon, do you get a data center or not? I mean, if James does his job, we get a data center, and ta-da, we're really happy because we hit our goal for the year. If James doesn't, then we got to really work hard to get to that $600 or $700 million number every year. We'll have hit about $10 billion in capital investment in the last 15 years, and we'll have hit about 40,000 jobs and almost 1,000 projects in that 15-year cycle. I mean, it's been a remarkable run, but we think that we need to pay more attention to, again, the type of company that we're bringing in and the quality of the jobs that we're going to be bringing in along with that. So that's the traditional economic development stuff that you expect us to do. Now, in the last campaign, we had a goal of 100 startups, particularly tech startups, that we'd be involved in helping to get started. Again, we hit that number. We'll hit that number this year, and we'll have hit the goal for the 5-year cycle. We've set a goal of 250 tech startups over the next 5 years. Significant increase. Now, we've done some things to change the ecosystem. So we now have the Startup Collaborative, which is a combination accelerator and incubator, along with the Chamber's role in terms of matching kind of entrepreneurial activities with mature industries and trying to solve some of their pain points here. We've got a really interesting ecosystem in the community. We think that we can ramp this up, which basically means more companies into the funnel at the top, so at the end you end up with 250 startups at the end of 5 years. But we're also growing businesses in the food business. So we've got a kitchen council that we started in Council Bluffs that's about helping people go take an idea for a food product and commercialize it into the grocery store. So think Grandma's famous raspberry pie that everybody says, boy, wouldn't it be great if I could buy that in Hy-Vee when I wanted it? How do we show somebody to do that? How do we show someone to build a recipe and build it larger and do it in a commercial kitchen and hit all the FDA standards and do everything necessary to build that business? We should have a lot of that in this community. We think we can do that through the new program called the Kitchen Council. And on the other side of the coin, we've helped 25 companies get started up in the construction business over the past 5 years, particularly small and emerging businesses who can respond to big public projects that are out there. So think about the guy who does drywall in your house. When you pick him up, you call him, pick up the phone and call him and say, I got a hole in my wall, can you fix it? He can do that. He's really great at it. He'd love to be able to hire people to do that work instead and build his business, so he's doing bigger projects. So through Winsley Duran's effort in the REACH program, we've been able to start up more than 25 companies over the past several years. So it's a random sort of collection of how do we do startups, but we think that we can be even more focused on having startups that hit some of our key targets. Now, the one I like to speak to is at University of Nebraska Med Center. They're building right now the IXL Center, which is a virtual reality artificial intelligence center that's going to be focused on healthcare education. Only one of its kind in the world. It's a $70 million facility. Right now, it's sort of like a stovepipe standing there. There is basically no infrastructure here to support it. There are no companies here to support it. There are no types of companies that tend to focus directly on virtual reality and AI in this market. We need to create that. We need to create a pool of companies that can build a support structure for that kind of industry. So it gives us an opportunity to literally build dozens and dozens of companies who can have their start by helping to support that kind of an industry. So you want us targeting not just the startup world, but also targeting those high growth kind of industries that might take a new place in our marketplace. And so we've got a target for that as well. And then finally, we want to diversify our business mix here a bit. We have about 25 to 26% of our population here is non-white, and yet our percentage of companies that are owned by non-white individuals is far less than what you would expect in this market of this size. REACH program is doing a lot to make a difference in that in construction, and we think we can do a lot more across that market, particularly since our population in this region, while it's growing, like we talked about earlier, it's growing primarily because of the non-white population. By 2050, this entire region will be a majority non-white population. By 2040, Omaha city limits will be majority non-white. Now think about what that means from a business perspective, but we'll talk about that in people as well, the difference that makes from a talent discussion as well. And then finally, international. It's really interesting. We've got a large international investment just south of us in Lincoln from Kawasaki, and yet we don't have a single Japanese supplier up here to support them. That's really unusual. I can't tell you how unusual that is with the proximity that we have to a market, to a company of that size. Not to have suppliers here is very odd. Now, I can take a lot of the blame for that. I've been here 15 years and we haven't figured it out yet, but we've just decided we've got to figure it out because not only is there Japanese capability here and some new partners like Marubeni who now have a major investment here, but we've got a huge Dutch presence up in Blair around the Cargill campus. We've got a German presence here in Omaha that we should be playing off of those relationships and building the opportunity, not just for trade, but for direct foreign investment too. And we're just not doing enough of it. And so we're going to be focused on that particular market as well. That's economic development. Frankly, I could stand up here and talk about that all day long because that's the fun stuff. The stuff that we don't really know how to do as well, but we're getting much, much better at is in talent and place. Let's talk about talent. We know that we've got to manage the talent pipeline better here, or we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we don't have enough people for you to hire and enough people to convince other folks to hire when they move here. So what do we mean by talent pipeline? Think about even kids starting in middle school. How do we start interesting them in careers here in Omaha, in this market? Well, we started doing this a couple of years ago with a program called Career Rocket, where we thought, the business community can actually show great middle school and high school kids what kind of different careers look like. Let's give them some career experiences. Just say 1 week out of every year, and we'll get a bunch of students from the schools, and we'll mix them with a bunch of business people. And we'll give them some opportunities to learn what a different career looks like. And at the time, we'll focus as many on STEM jobs as we possibly can so that kids are being exposed to these tech kind of jobs that are out there. The first year we had a goal of 10,000 students in 1 week. I thought they were crazy, that we would actually think the first year out of the box that we'd find 10,000 students, or even worse, that we'd find companies that would actually give 10,000 career opportunities in that first year. Well, we did 12,000. And that was pretty awesome. And as normally the case with our team, they came back for year 2 and said, well, let's do 15,000 this year. That sounded good to me, and so we started putting a program together, and sure enough, we did 22,000 students this year in the Career Rocket. 22,000. That's just mind-boggling when you think about all those kids who are going to have a career opportunity that they might not have otherwise had. So in Prosper 2.0, we've said, you know what, we need to do this regularly, and we need to give 100,000 kids career opportunities, career experiences over the next 5 years. Now, when we built that, we thought it might just be Career Rocket by itself. But as we've talked through this, we realize that those career opportunities just begin at Career Rocket, but they end at internships and full-time employment. And so we think that we need to start thinking also about how do we build a program that we have more interns coming out of our existing system, more companies that are hiring more interns, and those internships are turning into jobs at the end. So think about how we can do that, either with high school kids, sophomores, juniors, seniors, or even more likely, college students. So this is the second talent pipeline that we want to pay attention to. What about those college students who are either from Omaha or Nebraska and going to college here, or those kids that are coming here to go to college? How do we get them to stay? What if we could just increase the percentage of kids that stay here by 10%? How many kids does that represent? I don't know, but it's in the thousands. So what's it going to take to do that? Well, I think we can learn from an example that we had a few years ago. We started an internship program that focused on doing work with existing interns who companies had hired for the summer. We housed them all, about 250 of them, at UNO dormitories. And then we spent the summer making sure they learned about Omaha and built a network among themselves so that they had fun, they could see what the community had to offer, and they could get to know the company that they were interning with. When we started that summer, we asked how many of them would likely take a job if offered with the company that they were beginning their internship with. And about 40% said they were pretty sure they would take a job if given one while they were there, 40%. After the summer, we asked the same question, and it was upwards of 80%. So we doubled the number of people who thought that they would actually work here if given a job, and the only difference was that we acclimated them to the community and engaged them with a network of their peers so they could see, boy, this could be a cool place for us to live and work. What if we could do that with college students? What if the first experience that you get as a freshman at any college or university in this region is you're being immersed in the college and you're being immersed in the community? And what if in that very first month that you're here, you get offered an internship with a company? What if we introduce you to a company as a college freshman? And what if you get an intern every year? What if you get an internship every single year with a company? And what if by the time you get your 4-year degree done, everyone who gets a degree here gets a job offer? What do you think the stickiness is going to look like if we aggressively go after these people that are already here? I don't have to convince them to get on a plane and come here and see us uniquely. They're already here because they're going to school here. If we can convince thousands of those people to stay here, now we're starting to see that inorganic growth that I talked about, that we're paying attention to the pipeline in K through 12. We're paying attention to that pipeline of careers that might end up in a 2-year certificate rather than a 4-year degree. And we're worrying about those kids that are here for a 4-year degree and trying to keep them here. And then, of course, we've also got to be able to help companies like yourselves recruit very specific types of people whose skills might not exist in our market in the numbers that we need them. So let us sell the community while you sell your company. Let us be partners in this process of going to college campuses and working with you on recruiting individuals, because we know how to sell the community really well. You guys know your companies better than anybody. Together, we think we can make a difference in helping you recruit more people. So if you think about all those talent pipelines I just talked about, there's one particular pool that I haven't mentioned. So we've talked about what our population looks like and what our growth in our labor force looks like. Think about the fact that one out of every 8 people in our labor force has more than one job. 40 to 50,000 people out there are working more than one job every day. That's a lot of people. And the question I pose to you is that the most productive use of those folks? If I put it in the most mercenary terms I could possibly do, are they as productive as we need them to be in our economy? And the answer is no. Now, you can't force anybody to do anything, but my guess is that if we can find 10,000 of these people who are interested in doing more than they are, and we can figure out a way to get them into training and skills that they need, and then get them into full-time jobs with benefits, that we'll be able to, again, create a different talent pipeline than we have available today. So some of the goals that we've put in here about talent deal with taking 10,000 people, upgrading their skills and getting them into full-time employment. Finding 10,000 more people that we would add to the tech talent type of employment that we have here in this marketplace. 10,000 more tech workers, 100,000 career opportunities that we think we can expose kids to and college kids to. And then finally, I think Tim mentioned this earlier, diversity and inclusion is a big deal. When you look at what's going to happen to this community as a result of its changing population, companies are going to need to be better about creating inclusive environments and inclusive cultures so that people feel comfortable working there. As a community, we've got to create places where people feel comfortable as a community, that they can find the cultural amenities that they want to see here. And if you listen to what we found in 2040, we realized very quickly that diversity and inclusion and transportation, which I'll talk to you about here in a second, are 2 big issues that were brought up all the time. Transportation, inclusion, and diversity. Those things came up in virtually every group we talked to. Now, chambers of commerce aren't necessarily noted for D&I programs. However, I have found several of my peers that have been at it longer than we have. Cleveland's been at this for quite a while. Grand Rapids has got a kind of an award-winning program on diversity and inclusion. There's places we can learn from about how we can engage our companies in showing them how to create not just diverse environments, but inclusive cultures within those environments too. And so we've set a goal of having 100 companies at least stand up and say, yeah, we want to do the full Monty on diversity and inclusion, figure out how we can be the best in the market at that. And in the end, we want to be noted as a community where diversity and inclusion matters, and it's an important attribute of who we are. When we do all this stuff for talent, that will help us grow that talent piece much more significantly than it has been growing already. And if we have the careers for them, as we think we will as a result of business growth, we give them another reason to be here. But then the last piece of this is, why would they live here? Place matters. I mean, this might become urban legend over time, but I still listen to the number of times that millennial literature or millennials will tell me that they think about where they want to live before they think about where they want to work. And so if people are actually choosing places by what kind of amenities they have, what kind of culture they have, what kind of climate they have, what kind of terrain they have, how places fit with what these people want to do when they're not working, then we need to be a place of choice. And we need to figure out how to be that kind of a place of choice. One of the big pieces of that is about transportation. We know that we want to give people choices on where they can live. And more and more folks are saying, you know what, I'd really like to be able to live in a more dense environment where I don't have to have a car. I'd love to be able to walk to my neighborhood store or work at a place where I could take my bike, but basically have a dense environment that feels more like, heaven forbid, a big city kind of feel, but that transit is an important part of the quality of life in that community. And so while the Chamber has been involved in transportation discussions for a long time, we've never stood up and said, regional mass transit's important, and we need to be involved in making sure the business community is helping to drive this, because it's a substantive change that needs to happen if we're going to be perceived as the kind of place that we want to be. So in our goals, we've identified that in the next 5 years, we want to see a regional transit strategy developed, approved, funded, and under construction by the time the first 5 years is done. We've never been in that kind of a position to say this is where we're going to be. We think we have to stand up and lead on that issue, though. Now, the other part of place is kind of fun. It's actually saying, how do we make this an engaging place? How do we make it an innovative place? How do we turn our spaces into these places that people go, wow? I think we're seeing a lot of that already. You've seen the ConAgra development plans that have described what's going to happen here. That's going to be a wow kind of factor. In June, there's going to be an announcement about the riverfront development plan and what that looks like. You've probably heard rumbles about it, and maybe even were involved in some of the input sessions they had last fall. It all evolved out of the Urban Land Institute study that the Chamber instigated back in 2009. Has led to something that's going to be groundbreaking. I mean, you'll see this and not believe this is going to happen in Omaha, but it will. It's the kind of thing we need to make people go, wow, how did I miss this? How did Omaha become this without me knowing about it? And then we need to take all the rest of the cool places we have here and make sure they remain cool and innovative and engaging places. So the comparison I like to draw, although this morning I gave this similar speech, and I used these two comparisons, and someone said, well, I live near that park you're describing. What if I don't want that to happen there? I said, well, we'll cross that bridge if we ever come to it. But the fact is, compare Millennial Park in Chicago. How many of you have seen Millennial Park before? Okay, compare that with Memorial Park here in Omaha. About the same amount of ground. You can sit in both of them and watch people go by if you like. Once a year, we have 50,000 people that sit on that hill over there and watch a concert in Memorial Park, which is great. Every day, 50,000 people walk through Millennial Park and look at the video towers and at the Bean and at the Navy Yard and figure out how they can engage with each other. Now, I'm not suggesting that we have to have that level of investment in every one of the 200 parks that exist in our community, but what if we could take 10 of them a year and have people figure out a way to make them engaging, innovative spaces? And what if we start becoming noted as a place where not only can you have nice pastoral settings, but you can also go and have engaging places that a variety of different age groups and recreational activities could be available. We need to make this a place that people talk about. We need to be on all those lists. But really the most important list is the one when you ask a college kid, where do you think you'd like to live? Instead of them saying just Austin and Raleigh and Boston and Chicago and Denver, Omaha's got to be on that list. Not just the ones the magazines write about, but the ones that are in the people's minds because this is such a cool place for them to live. If we do all these things, we think we can make this economy grow faster, we can attract the people that we need, and we can be the kind of place we've identified in that 2040 strategy. To do that, we need all of your help in more ways than one. Certainly we need you to support this financially, and we'd appreciate any investment that you make, and Tim and I will be following up with the request that we make of you today to make sure we can answer any questions you have and see if we can move you to feel like you want to invest in this strategy. But we also need your engagement, because we don't do anything alone. Matter of fact, the Chamber has no authority to do anything. I mean, by law, we can't fix a pothole, we can't pass a law, we can't do any of that stuff. But by virtue of you being partners with us, and all the regions around, all the counties around us in our region being partners, we can really accomplish really great things just by the sheer numbers and the sheer momentum that we can create, because all of us want to see something really good happen. So we need your engagement too, okay? So, with that, questions that you might have about this ramble that I just went through, or what Tim or Dana talked about?
I've worked with Tim before in the past, and you're a really bright, capable guy. You've done remarkable things to this state and this community since you've been here. I don't know, Dana, I know your reputation, and it's stellar. I don't know you personally, but I think we've got the right leadership in you. I think we've got a unique scenario in Omaha with private-public partnerships. It's got a long, storied history, and I think it's time to be bolder, right? I mean, and is 30 million the right number? I don't know. I'd be curious how you came up with that number, but I think the more important thing is, let's take advantage of the momentum we do have. Let's take advantage of the intelligence we have and act. And I just want to take a moment to applaud you guys for raising your hand and standing up.
Thank you.
And coming up with what seems to me to be an extremely bright and astute observation and plan going forward.
Great. Thanks, Al. We appreciate that. Dana and I were talking a little bit before then that we were trying to figure out if we hadn't done any of this stuff that had been done really since the early 90s when this kind of economic development cycle happened. And today came up and said, yep, we're going to raise $32 million and we're going to do all this great stuff. It would have been a tough row to hoe. It would have been pushing a wet noodle uphill and probably not getting it there, really difficult. But we've built a lot of momentum. not just we. I mean, we represent about 40% of the investment that happens in this community, the projects that we have. But then the community investment that happens here is just truly remarkable. And thankfully, the chamber is at the table for a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening, and we need to take advantage of that momentum now. I agree with you. A lot going on. So thank you,
I
Alan.
think for us, we just challenge all of us to step up, like, and think beyond, what's right in front of us, and think about the art of possible.
Here's what I know, and I'm going to give an OPPD example and then an example I heard this morning at a Prosper 2 meeting with another company. We've sponsored 23 kids from North High, South High, Blackburn Alternative, in Central. These are high school kids. We started a boot camp in the fall, gave them all the career experiences in our business, from cybersecurity to engineering to construction to line technicians to everything, call center reps to whatever it may be. We have now hired 23 of them to be interns this year as freshmen, coming into their freshman year in college. Great example. I mean, these are going to be really good kids. These are good kids, very good kids that are given this opportunity. I heard from Sequence Health Group and their partnership with First National Bank and Blue Cross Blue Shield with Avenue Scholars. They're taking 90 kids that have a propensity for tech talent and driving that to ground and giving internships within their organizations. So what's driving those kinds of conversations is the ideals that we're presenting in this 2040. And so what we're seeing are companies taking action. To your point, I think, Alan, is very clearly they're taking action. And I think that what the chamber wants to do is begin to identify that best practice. Because your organization may not be able to handle a program for 23 kids independently, but what if you take 4 from this program or be part of this other program or whatever works for you? And so I think the chamber's value is how do we vet that out and create a community-wide initiative that support our tech talent initiative very clearly. But there are some really, to David's point, some really good things going on. That isn't just kind of a 1 week a year in career talent. It's about engaging and immersing kids in our businesses. And I tell you, I had 3 line techs that took a vacation day on Saturday to attend their graduation, because there's 5 of these kids that'll be a line techs and start the Metro program. And we'll bring them in this summer to do that. First National, Blue Cross, Sequence is doing the exact same thing, because they need software developers, they need analysts, they need a variety of other things. So there's some really interesting things, but I tell you, it's this kind of, 1, business need, but 2, a belief that we have to really make a difference, and we have to do things that we traditionally would not have done. I remember starting in this business, you only kind of got juniors to be interns, right, or do a co-op. Then we got into the kind of the tech kind of competition with all the tech giants, and then boom, we had to move to freshman year right away. We had to get them in, and once you got them in your company, then they kind of got that feel of what it means to be part of the company family, and it was very tough for them to go someplace else. That's the kind of experiences that I think we're going to begin to develop with these strategies that we're laying out here, and I think it will begin to. It's going to pick up speed, it's going to pick up pace, it's going to pick up, I think, quality as we move forward. So I appreciate you challenging us, 1, but also appreciate your thoughts. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah. David, I have a question on the transportation or the regional transit strategy that you talked about. I know this has been talked about many years, even back when I was in the Young Professionals Council, which has been a while. But will the chamber take the lead on that, or how will that come together?
That's a great question. So we've actually built I'll call it a blue ribbon board. There's a smart cities effort going on right now that Derek Leathers from Werner Transportation and the mayor are co-chairing. And they've agreed to even add some more people to it, but basically to take on the notion of this regional transportation planning effort. The people around that table are several of the foundations, the planning associations, the chamber, several other business folks, the young professionals, a whole bunch of different folks are saying, yeah, this is a top priority for us. We are hiring a director of transportation at the chamber who will be driving this every single day. And the goal is to hit that goal that we've set in Prosper 2.0, that we are going to be leading in this effort. And the business community is not just going to be following behind, but raising our hand saying this is important to the future of this community. So the difference, I think, is the intensity with which the business community is going to engage in this. We've always been there talking and listening and sitting around the table and trying to figure out how this might happen, but we've really never stood up and led the parade. We don't think that it happens unless we do. And this isn't just us sitting around the table one night thinking, what else can we do? This is people reaching out to us continually saying, if the business community doesn't jump into this, it just doesn't happen. And so the board and exec committee said, yeah, we've got to jump in and make this work.
Thank you. And this just isn't, I mean, I think a strategy around how do you get a light rail from the airport to downtown out to UNMC. This is how do I get somebody that's either in South Omaha or North Omaha out to West Sarpy County for the jobs and the positions that are out there. And the current infrastructure, they can't get there today. I mean, it's an hour and a half or 2 hours of travel and stops and moves in order for them to get where they need to get. And it's tough to do that. And so we limit the ability for people to uplift in skill and development and jobs because we can't get them there. It's not easy to do that. And so that's the bigness, I think, of the strategy.
When we start talking about those part-time jobs that I mentioned earlier, one of the key reasons that people don't have full-time work is they can't get to the job. They don't have a car. If you don't have a car in this market, you can't get a job somewhere more than walking distance away from your house. And that's just patently wrong, first off. And it ensures that we're not going to be taking advantage of our entire productive workforce if we keep it that way. So again, it may sound real mercenary, but if I can't move people from Northeast and Southeast Omaha to where the jobs are, we're not doing our job. We're not worried about prosperity for everybody, and we need to be.
Yeah. Do you have any information on where people are coming from when they come into Omaha, and also where they're going when they leave Omaha? I realize there's like a lot of different things into that, but if there's any similarities or differences that we can draw between the community offerings and the economic opportunities between the areas that they're coming from.
Yeah, the where they're going is difficult because once they leave college, I mean, the largest share of people leaving here are 18 to 19-year-olds. Unfortunately, the largest number of them coming back isn't the 23 and 24-year-olds. That's what you would hope is you leave, they go off to college, and all of them come back. We're just not seeing that. And so we don't have real good information about where students are going once they have left here. We know where they're coming from. We get a large number of people coming here from greater Nebraska, which unfortunately puts greater Nebraska at a deficit. I mean, Nebraska as a whole is at a deficit, mostly because folks are coming from greater Nebraska, moving here or leaving greater Nebraska and not coming back. We get a good number from the Midwest around us, mostly because they're coming here to college. So if you think about the three main reasons that people move to a place: career, college, and family. The family stuff we do pretty well. Matter of fact, somebody recommended that we do a grandmother strategy. That we have grandma call every college kid who's not in Omaha and say, come on back home, grandma needs to see you more frequently, and see if we can convince them to come. That might work, who knows? We may try that one, but in the end, we've got to do something to make sure that if the family is here and we can make this a good enough place and the careers or opportunities for people, that they'll be here as choice. College students, we need to be able to convince them to come here for more than just college and stay here, as I mentioned earlier. So we do know that 2/3 of the in-migration are internationals, which is really intriguing if you think about it. I mean, the brain drain is such that we're losing about as many college graduated 25-year-olds as we are attracting them here. We need to start seeing net gains in that cycle. And so we don't know enough about people that are here and where they're going, but we need to start figuring that out. We just don't have the data yet.
I guess the reason I offer is, coming from LinkedIn, we have a number of opportunities in which we can leverage the data that we have. So for instance, if a college student is leaving Omaha and they're updating their LinkedIn profile after they go to college, there's an opportunity to utilize some of that data to figure out exactly where we can find those people.
That's a great example. That's a great idea. Well, we've been thinking about how do we get to alumni associations who keep track, but social media keeps track of it even better because people are self-populating that. We ought to be tapping you, and that's a great idea. We'll talk to LinkedIn about this. That's terrific. Thank you for that. Well, thank you so much for your interest. Thank you for your past investment and everything that you do to make this community great. We are obviously on a roll here to try and make Prosper 2.0 happen. So our goal is to hit 32 million hopefully by the end of this year. And we're talking to all of our existing investors first, and then we'll be adding another 100 or so investors of people that maybe have come to the community over the past decade, but have not yet engaged in economic development support, and so we're going to be talking with them as well. So if you don't mind, I'm going to end with a quick story. This one still boggles my mind. So I was in South Carolina before I came here and was not involved in attracting the BMW plant there, but watched them build it and then we were involved heavily in attracting suppliers to them. And I will confess to you that until I moved here to Omaha, I had no idea that Omaha was in the running for the BMW plant. It didn't surprise me because every state in the country wanted it, and everyone went after it. But the fact is, I didn't know how close Omaha came to getting it. So you all have heard the story, right? BMW was looking for a North American manufacturing facility, and Omaha and Nebraska threw their hat in the ring, raised $1 million, which is the first time we'd really raised big numbers for economic development. Went after it, and everyone tells us that we came in second. And I must admit, I understand why people thought we did really well, but I was a bit dubious about us coming in second because, frankly, we had some fatal flaws, and I'm not sure, as good as Dee is doing economic development, I'm not sure even she could have overcome the fact that we're in the wrong time zone. We don't have a deep water port, and we had no auto suppliers here. Other than that, we're a perfect location for an automotive assembly plant that put those as major criteria for being here. But this is the 20th anniversary, I think, of BMW opening their facility in South Carolina. And they had a radio program that was celebrating all the stuff that BMW had done there. And they had a gentleman named Bobby Hitt, who at the time was the Secretary of Commerce for South Carolina when they were attracting the plant. And Bobby told this story. And I had never heard this before, but it just brought home to me what you can really do, irrespective of what the odds are, if you really put your mind to it. So it just so happened that BMW, at the very end of the process, it kind of set a date certain of when they were going to make the announcement about who was going to get the facility. And it also was just serendipitous that the South Carolina contingent happened to be in Germany on that day. And Carroll Campbell, who was the chairman or the governor of South Carolina at the time, and Bobby Hitt were sitting outside the chairman's office. And the chairman called me in and said, well, you didn't have to come all the way out here. I was going to call you today anyway. Unfortunately for you, though, I'm getting ready to call the governor of Nebraska and tell them that they landed the BMW facility. We're going to go to Omaha. And Carroll Campbell said, well, can you tell me why? And he said, well, yeah, you really never showed us a site that was just perfect for us. I mean, the Omaha market, we had a couple that we could choose from, and they just really did an amazing job of showing us how they can make this really work for them. And while we really enjoyed the effort, we just think that they have a better site for us. And unfortunately for all of us in this room, Carroll Campbell asked exactly the right question next. And he said, well, have you seen a site that we haven't showed you that you'd be interested in South Carolina? And even more unfortunately for us, the CEO of BMW said, absolutely. Every time I fly into Greenville-Spartanburg Airport, there's this beautiful, flat, forested piece of property right next to the airport. I've always wondered why you didn't show us that property. And Carroll said, again, asking exactly the right question, well, will you give us 2 weeks? And if we can't deliver that site in 2 weeks, call the folks in Nebraska and tell them the plant is theirs. And to his credit, the BMW CEO said, no, we kind of set today as the deadline, and I really owe them an answer. And again, Carroll Campbell said exactly the right thing. Well, is this your project, or is this their project? And the CEO said, okay, fine, I'll give you 2 weeks. 2 weeks, they delivered the piece of property, they built on that piece of property, and Omaha ended up not getting the project. Now, I tell you what, Omaha had no business being in the running for this facility, none. There isn't an economic development example out there that'll tell you, other than someone locating near a place where they used to have a lake house near a kid, which happens occasionally, we had no business winning this project. But what it showed you is that this community went crazy and did exactly the right thing that they needed to do. They had the leadership to get the right people in front of BMW and convince them they could do stuff that nobody else could do, even though we had basically no business being in the running for this thing. And we were that close to winning it. We were a taxi cab ride away from winning that project. And we didn't get it. But imagine what's happened since then, because that's the nexus for where we are today. If that doesn't happen, the first fundraising campaign called Target Omaha doesn't happen, which means Go campaign doesn't happen, which means Prosper doesn't happen, which means we're not here today talking about what Omaha could be in 2040 with the momentum that Alan mentioned. So we've got a golden opportunity to do just remarkable things. These next 5 or 10 years are going to be just something that I don't think anybody in Omaha can imagine. This is just an amazing time for us. And we'd love to have your support to kind of make that happen. So sorry to preach at you, but it's a story that I think tells you what we can do when we put our minds to it. And I think we ought to take another step and put our minds to something really spectacular. Okay? Great. Thanks.